Imagine you wake up one morning and the person you love most in the world is gone. Not traveling, not unreachable, gone. And almost instantly, your mind does something fascinating, something that psychologists have studied for decades. It reaches for a reason, a target, a thing to blame, because grief without direction is unbearable. The human brain, as neuroscientist Antonio Damasio wrote in his landmark book, Descartes' Error, is fundamentally a meaning-making machine. It cannot sit comfortably in chaos, so it builds a story, and in that story there is always a villain. Today I want to tell you about a young man named Tao, a boy from the last village at the foot of the last mountain. And through his journey, a journey that takes him from devastating loss all the way to the peak of human wisdom, I want to share something that most of us spend our entire lives trying to understand. The enemy is not what you think it is, and when you finally face it, isn't there. Tao's story begins on his birthday. He is out working in the fields when his friend comes running toward him, shouting his name. Tao sprints to the edge of the village, past the boundary the villagers call the death barrier, and there on the other side of that line, lying motionless on the ground, is his father. His father is not breathing. Tao drags him back across the boundary. The village doctor examines the old man carefully, and then, with quiet gravity, the doctor delivers the verdict. The snake did this. Now the snake is not a myth in this village. It is real, at least as real as anything that causes suffering without explanation tends to feel. For generations, the snake has been the name given to every disease, every misery, every loss that the village cannot account for. It is the scapegoat of the unexplained. And now it has taken Tao's father. The day after, the villagers come to pay their respects. They say the things people say. What a shame. We're so sorry. He was a good man. And Tao thanks them one by one, as people do, and then they leave. And then he is alone. This is the part that grief literature almost never prepares you for. Dr. Colin Murray Parkes, one of the leading bereavement researchers of the 20th century, described this phase in his clinical work as the emptiness after the ceremony. The social rituals of mourning are designed to hold us temporarily, but when the ritual ends, the absence rushes in like a tide. Tao sits that night and watches the great mountain above his village glowing with strange light, rumbling with the energy of beings the villagers call the new gods. Nobody knows what the new gods do up there. Nobody ever goes to find out. But that night, Tao dreams of the snake. He sees its eyes burning with rage, with contempt, with everything he needs there to be a reason for. And in the morning, before the sun is properly up, he makes a decision. Enough. He packs water, food, and in a quiet and deeply human gesture, he takes the jar of his father's ashes from the pyre. Then he walks to the death barrier. Stop! The village doctor shouts after him. You'll die out there. You can't beat the snake. Leave it alone. Tao closes his eyes and steps over. This is the moment that Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, would have immediately recognized. In his seminal work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, Campbell identified the threshold crossing as one of the most universal moments in human storytelling across every culture on Earth. The hero steps beyond the familiar world, past the boundary that society says must not be crossed, and enters the wilderness of transformation. But here is what Campbell also noted, and what most people miss. The wilderness does not transform you by giving you what you are looking for. It transforms you by forcing you to question why you are looking. Tao spends the entire first day searching for the snake. He finds nothing. He sees his father's face in the trees, the face of a man who used to bring him breakfast in the mornings, blankets in the evenings. A man who raised him, who gave him his time, his patience, his understanding of the world. And now that man has walked alone into the dark, and Tao cannot follow him there. The grief researcher Dr. Therese Rando described this experience as secondary losses, the grief within the grief. You don't only lose the person, you lose the daily rituals they anchored, the morning voice, the familiar smell, the routine of being loved in a specific way by a specific person that no one else can replicate. Tao is thirsty and lost by the time he reaches the river at the base of the great mountain. He drinks for a long time. And when he finally looks up, an old woman is sitting nearby, taking a long swig from a hip flask. He tries to ignore her. She calls out anyway. "You look like someone with unfinished snake-related business." Tao stops. The old woman points up the mountain. She says she saw the snake go that way, mumbling to himself about an old man he had just killed. Tao is skeptical. He is also desperate. And these two things in combination are precisely how life leads us toward the truths we are not quite ready for. He starts up the mountain. She follows. He tells her bluntly that she is old, drunk, and not particularly useful. She tells him she knows things about the snake and about the new gods too. "Take me with you," she says, "and I'll teach you how to kill it." "I'll kill it myself," Tao says, "with my bare hands." "No," she says quietly. "No, you won't." They climb together. They sleep on the hard ground. They eat bread for him, her flask for her, and they keep moving upward. By midday on the second day, they are high enough to look back down at the village. From this altitude, it is startlingly small, just a handful of buildings, a few thin threads of smoke rising into the sky. "Were there other villages once?" Tao asks. "Yes," she says, "a long time ago. There were enormous ones, millions of people, billions even. What happened to them?" The old woman takes a long drink. Then she says one word, "Ambition." She pauses. Then she asks him something unexpected. "When you kill the snake, do you think you'll be happy forever after that?" "Yes," Tao says, without hesitation. She says, "just that." This is one of the most psychologically loaded exchanges in the entire story. Because what Tao is describing is something that researchers at Harvard study of adult development, the longest-running study on human happiness in history, spanning over 80 years, identified as one of our most consistent cognitive errors. We believe, deeply and stubbornly, that the elimination of a specific problem will produce lasting happiness. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, a term coined by positive psychology researcher Tal Ben-Shahar. We tell ourselves, "When this is gone, then I'll be okay. When I get that, then I'll be okay. When I have crossed that mountain and killed that snake, then I'll be okay." And we are almost always wrong. Higher up the mountain, the world begins to change. The trees become twisted columns of crystal. The rocks reveal themselves to be hexagonal metal slabs beneath the surface. Strange machines appear, silver and glass, geometric and intricate, humming with a power that feels ancient and abandoned. Lines of light float in the air, glyphs that mean nothing to Tao but feel like they once meant everything to someone. The old woman calls all of this old science. Tao asks what science is. "Like magic," she says, "but it works." On a glowing pedestal sits a pair of spectacles. The old woman picks them up and puts them on Tao's face. What follows is one of the most disorienting experiences a human mind can have, and one that many contemplative traditions, from Buddhist Vipassana meditation to the philosophical practice of what Stoic philosophers called the view from above, deliberately attempt to induce. Tao sees reality without the comfortable filters that daily life provides. He sees himself, truly sees himself, not as the center of a story, but as something almost impossibly small in an almost impossibly large universe. A speck on a blot, on a smudge, on a blemish, on a fleck, in a grain of sand among a billion other beaches. And those beaches themselves are just more grains of sand, all the way down, all the way out in every direction forever. The old woman removes the glasses. 21st century science, she says, bit before your time. She hands them to him and tells him to keep them safe. Tao stares at her. "Who are you?" he asks. "Who's anyone?" she replies. Higher still, they find something that stops Tao cold. A river of blood, coins, jewels, scepters, crowns scattered on scorched ground. The air smells of death and glory and dominion, a smell that has no single word name in English, but that every student of history knows in their gut when they encounter the remnants of power. And sticking up from the earth, a sword. Red and purple and gold at the hilt, silver along the blade, beautiful and terrible. The old woman tells him to take it. When Tao pulls the sword from the ground, what happens to him is a precise psychological portrait of what Lord Acton famously articulated in 1887 in his letter to Bishop Mandel Creighton. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In an instant, Tao feels invincible. He feels heard. He feels above the bullies, the elders, the oracles, the brutes, above everyone who ever ignored him or underestimated him. He feels above even the snake. Great bolts of fire and lightning leap from the sword's tip. Swarms of locusts rise from the soil. He laughs a laugh that echoes across the entire mountain. And somewhere in that laughter, a thought forms. He could end the world if he wanted, and nobody could stop him. This is not an exaggeration of power's effect. Philip Zimbardo, the psychologist behind the famous Stanford prison experiment of 1971, spent decades studying how ordinary people behave when given unchecked authority. The findings were stark. Power does not reveal character, it distorts it. It accelerates the worst impulses while numbing the checks that normally keep them quiet. The sword does not make Tao evil. It simply removes the friction that kept him human. The next morning, he eats in silence, and they keep climbing. But the mountain has one more stop before the peak. They hear music upbeat, irreverent, calling to them, and they find the ruins of what was once a great celebration. Empty bottles, discarded things, the skeleton of a party that someone once believed would go on forever. In the ruins, a glowing tankard full of something that smells like warm mead. "Drink a little," the old woman says. "What is it?" "The indulgence you'll kill the snake with." He drinks. And then she grabs his hand and pulls him into a dance. The mountain spins, the colors blur, and Tao is suddenly, violently free of everything. His father, the snake, the village, the grief, all of it just gone, dissolved into music and motion and the wild liberation of not caring about any of it. "What if there's no point to anything?" the old woman sings. "Who cares?" Tao agrees. This is nihilism in its most seductive form. And it is seductive. Any philosopher from Friedrich Nietzsche to Albert Camus would tell you that. The idea that nothing ultimately matters can feel for a moment like the most radical freedom imaginable. No expectations, no responsibilities, no heartbreak that means anything. They dance toward the edge of a cliff. The stars spin. The music thunders. And in the morning, Tao wakes up with a pounding head and a mouth that feels like old ash. The nihilist waltz always ends the same way. The morning comes anyway. Just before the peak, Tao finally stops walking and demands answers. "Who are you? Where are the new gods? What is going on?" The old woman stops, rolls her eyes, and then quietly she tells him what year it actually is. By his calendar, it is the year 326. By hers, it is the 98th century. His ancestors, she explains, built everything he has seen on this mountain. They became extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily wise. They developed technologies that would seem indistinguishable from magic to anyone in Tao's era. They gathered the spectacles of perfect knowledge, the sword of ultimate power, the tankard of complete abandon, the armor of immortality, the necklace of love and memory. And then she tells him something that quietly breaks him. They still weren't happy. They tried knowing everything. The snake was still there. They tried overpowering everything. The snake was still there. They tried forgetting everything. The snake was still there. They tried living forever. They tried clinging to each other. They climbed the same mountain one generation after the next, looking for the same snake in the same rocks, in the same holes, higher and higher and higher, and they found nothing. And so they are gone now, all of them, all except her. At the very top of the mountain, a small, windswept plateau in the rain, the snake is there. Its back is turned. It sits very still, looking out over the dead wilderness below. Tao approaches. His heart is in his ears. His hand is wrapped around the locket at his chest, the one containing his father's picture. He thinks of his father, thinks of the man, thinks of the emptiness of death and the futility of rage. He closes his eyes. He screams. He brings the sword down with everything he has. The ringing echo travels all the way back to the foot of the mountain. He opens his eyes. The snake is gone. He turns to the old woman. "Did you see where it went?" "No," she says. "I didn't see it." Because it doesn't exist. What the old woman says next is one of the most quietly devastating monologues in the story. She asks him something like this: did he really believe there was a single evil creature on a single mountain responsible for all the bad things that had ever happened in the world? Did he really think the universe was that simple? That every illness, every accident, every loss, every misery had one author and one address? Because that, she says, is what his species has always done. And it is also why his species, her species, once, is almost entirely gone. Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology and the author of Learned Optimism, identified something he called explanatory style, the habitual way people explain why bad things happen. Those with a pessimistic explanatory style tend to see the causes of bad events as permanent, universal, and personal. One snake. Responsible for everything, living on a mountain, eternal and deliberate. The snake, of course, is not real. The real answer, as it always is complicated. Tao's father went beyond the death barrier to find a birthday gift, a meteorite, because his son asked for one. And the wilderness is dangerous, and accidents happen. And the reasons for suffering are almost never simple, almost never singular, and almost never located on a mountain. She is gentle when she says it. But she says it clearly. And then she takes the jar of ashes from Tao's bag and places it in his hands. He opens the jar slowly. The wind takes his father, flings the ashes out over the mountain in a long silver curtain, and in the last light of dusk, they look, just for a moment, like a million tiny meteorites, all done with being cosmic, bound for the everyday ground. The old woman sits beside him as the sky clears. And she speaks to him the way someone speaks when they have watched an entire civilization make the same mistake for 10,000 years and still believe stubbornly in the value of saying it one more time. She says, "Your ancestors ruled the galaxy. They were brilliant and powerful and full of potential. And still," she says, "they could not accept that meaning, real, sustaining, durable meaning, is not found in the heights. It is not found in perfect knowledge or perfect power or perfect forgetting or perfect life or perfect love. It is found in the trenches of everyday living, in the ordinary, unremarkable, deeply underrated act of showing up, of being decent, of being present for the people who are still here." She tells him, "Go home, Tao. Don't try to be a hero or a sage or a warrior. Just exist for a while, be decent. That is heroism enough. It always has been." And she says, "The universe does not care about you specifically, but your village does, your friends do, and I do. And your father did more than you know. He can take the sword, the glasses, the armor, the tankard. He can rule the world if he wants." He says no. "Good choice," she tells him. He puts the glasses down on the plateau. He sets the sword in the soil. He takes off the armor. He puts the tankard beside the rest. He keeps the necklace, just the necklace. Just the picture of his father, small and warm against his chest. And then he turns and walks back down the mountain. The descent is easier than the climb. It usually is. The sky is clear. The village is visible far below, small and warm and completely ordinary, and completely his. He walks without urgency now, without the weight of a monster to hunt, without the borrowed power of ancient civilizations trying to solve a problem that was never solvable by force. He walks as someone who has looked into the deepest and truest nature of loss, who has held a jar of ashes on a windy peak, who has, for one moment, seen the universe without its comfortable masks, and chosen still to walk back toward other people. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor whose book, Man's Search for Meaning, has sold over 16 million copies, wrote something that feels exactly right here. He wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Tao cannot bring his father back. He cannot unring the bell of loss. He cannot find a snake to kill that will make the world stop being the kind of place where fathers die on their children's birthdays, looking for something to make them smile. But he can go home. He can remember. He can love the people who are still there. He can be decent. And in the last quiet of the descent, with the ashes of his father already settling into the mountain soil forever, becoming part of the stone and the wind and the roots of the crystal trees, Tao thinks that this, perhaps, is enough. Not because everything is fine, but because it is not yet over, and it will give him time to remember.